The moment Derek said it, I felt my chest tighten, not because of the words themselves, but because of the conviction behind them. He said no one would ever love me. As a single parent, as if raising Lily made me broken, incomplete, or unworthy. There was no malice in the way he spoke, only certainty. Certainty that I was limited, that my life would always be a compromise, and that I would never matter. In the way he imagined I could. I should have walked away then. But at that moment I realized that words, like his, are dangerous not because they are true, but because they are designed to linger, to plant doubt, and to shape perception. And for years, those words haunted me more than any fight, any argument, or any rejection could. Before I can explain what happened next, you need to know who I am. Because this story is not just about heartbreak, but about how underestimation becomes the fuel for justice. My name is Samantha, and I am a single mother living in California, raising my daughter Lily alone after a relationship I once believed. It ended abruptly with betrayal, arrogance, and words meant to diminish me. Lily is everything I have, and everything I fight for. She is 6 years old, bright, observant, and the reason I have learned to move carefully because a parent's mistakes can echo in the life of a child more than in their own. Derek, my ex, is the kind of man who believes confidence is proof of superiority, charm is proof of morality, and control is proof of destiny. He underestimated me, my strength, and the fact that a single parent can not only survive but thrive. There is also Rachel, my best friend, who has been my anchor since the breakup. She knows every fear I have, every strategy I consider, and every way Derek tried to manipulate the world into thinking I was less than capable. Rachel is the voice of reason. I didn't know I needed until I could know. Longer see clearly myself. Finally, there is Marcus, a person I met recently, whose presence is subtle but transformative, not because he changes my life directly, but because his perspective allows me to see Derek and the world as they truly are and to plan a response that is deliberate rather than emotional. At the time Derek made that cruel assertion, I felt small, invalidated, and frustrated, in a way that only a parent trying to protect a child can feel. The world suddenly seemed smaller, harsher, and more judgmental than it had before. But beneath the fear, a spark ignited. Not anger at Derek alone, but a realization that his certainty, his dismissal of me, and his assumption that single motherhood equals weakness were invitations to prove him wrong in a way he could never anticipate. It did not happen overnight. The journey from shock to strategy is never immediate because clarity demands patience, observation, and understanding the true nature of the people you are up against. I began noticing the ways Derek tried to control perception, the subtle comments meant to undermine my confidence in public, the casual attempts to isolate me socially, and the assumptions he shared with friends, family, and colleagues about my limitations. Every comment, every smirk, every sideways glance built a picture of him as powerful and me as incapable, but also painted a roadmap of his weaknesses. Confidence without empathy leaves holes. Arrogance without foresight becomes predictable. And overconfidence is the most dangerous flaw of all. That was when I decided that my life could no longer be influenced by his opinions, manipulations, or assumptions. I would not just survive as a single mother. I would thrive, and I would ensure that Derek understood, publicly and unmistakably, the consequences of underestimating me. But first, I needed patience, observation, and proof. Because psychological revenge is never loud at the start, it grows quietly, invisibly, until it is unstoppable. And as I watched Derek from a distance, confident that no one would challenge him, I began to outline every step, every weakness, and every way karma would speak louder than any words I could ever say. It would not be immediate, it would not be simple, and it would not be polite. But it would be decisive, visible, and irreversible. And in that moment, a question anchored itself firmly in my mind. If someone declares you unlovable, incapable, or broken, what happens when the person they try to diminish becomes the person they cannot ignore? After that day, when Derek's arrogance was laid bare and his words still echoed in my mind, I understood that confronting him emotionally would accomplish nothing. Anger without precision is wasted energy, and I could not afford to waste my energy. Not for myself, and certainly not for Lily. Instead, I decided to study him, quietly, as one studies a storm approaching. Every interaction, every comment, every carefully constructed social display became data. His confidence was performative, predictable, and rooted entirely in the assumption that no one could touch him without visible confrontation. I began documenting patterns. At family gatherings, he subtly undermined me, making casual remarks about single parenthood that would go unnoticed by anyone not paying attention, remarks meant to erode my credibility without leaving fingerprints. At work, he whispered doubts about my stability as a mother, planting seeds of skepticism with friends and acquaintances. Even those who liked me began hesitating, questioning small decisions that Derek framed as reckless or irresponsible. The most frustrating part was how invisible this manipulation felt. It was subtle, psychological, and devastating, because single parents are often forced to explain themselves for every choice. And Derek knew this. But I also noticed something crucial: overconfidence leaves traces. The more he tried to make others see me, small inconsistencies and predictable patterns emerged. Every one of these tiny cracks was a piece of leverage, waiting to be used. Instead, she helped me think strategically. She reminded me that karma is invisible. Arrogance can have consequences, magnified when the observer is patient, disciplined, and deliberate. Marcus was someone who made me see Derek from a perspective I had refused before: objective, detached, and analytical. His insights into human behavior and social dynamics allowed me to understand exactly how Derek's carefully curated image could be dismantled without me needing to fight him head-on. You do not strike with emotion, you strike with truth made visible. Be argued away. As weeks passed, I noticed patterns in Derek's arrogance that became predictable. The way he presented himself at social gatherings, the way he spoke about me, the assumptions he made about my future as a single mother. These were not mistakes, they were invitations to reveal his hubris. At the same time, I strengthened my own life quietly but intentionally. I invested more time in Lily's activities, connected with her teachers and community, and nurtured my friendships, especially those Derek attempted to diminish. Every small success became a foundation, not just for my confidence, but for the social context in which his downfall would become visible. What Derek did not anticipate was the quiet power of consistency. While he focused on undermining me, I focused on strengthening every area he assumed was vulnerable. I built credibility where he assumed weakness, visibility where he assumed obscurity, and resilience where he assumed fragility. It was not revenge yet, not in the dramatic sense, but it was preparation. Psychological revenge requires careful timing. The world must see the injustice clearly before the correction occurs, because if the correction is invisible, so is the lesson. And so I waited. Comma. One evening, I attended a community event, purely as a spectator. Derek arrived, with his usual arrogance, presenting himself as charming, confident, untouchable. He spoke to friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, making subtle remarks about my single parenthood as if I were absent, undermining me again without ever realizing. I was observing every word, every gesture, and every audience reaction. That night, I noticed something remarkable. Even his closest friends, the ones who often nodded in agreement with him, began to glance at me indirectly, recognizing the difference between my presence and his performance. Every smirk he gave, every casual insult he assumed was unnoticed, was now recorded in memory. ready to be revealed at the right moment. I knew that exposing him would require more than observations. It would require leverage, timing, and an undeniable display of consequences. The next steps were delicate: gathering evidence, highlighting inconsistencies, and creating social situations where his arrogance could no longer hide behind charm or manipulation. Rachel helped me plan discreet ways to gather proof without appearing vindictive. We documented every statement, every act of belittlement, and every public and private attempt to undermine my credibility. Evidence was the ultimate weapon, and once compiled, it could not be refuted. Meanwhile, Marcus provided guidance on strategic timing. Psychological exposure is most effective when the target assumes control is absolute. Derek had convinced himself that I was powerless and that no one would challenge his narrative. That assumption would be his undoing. At home, I focused on Lily, ensuring her life remained stable and secure. Every smile, every success, and every small achievement became a silent testament to my capability as a mother. The contrast between her thriving life and Derek's assumptions was another piece of leverage, subtle yet undeniable. The first public crack appeared during a social gathering I had initially avoided. Derek, as usual, made a comment about single parenthood in front of mutual friends. I remained composed, listening quietly, but several attendees noticed the inconsistency between his statements and reality. His overconfidence was starting to unravel, quietly but unmistakably. From that moment, I understood that the arc of revenge is as much about patience as it is about precision. The world will rarely notice manipulation immediately, but every small misstep, every arrogant assertion becomes visible when observed carefully. By the end, Derek was beginning to feel tension, though he did not understand its source. The cracks were appearing subtly. The first dominoes of karma lined up perfectly, ready for the moment when everything would tip in my favor. By the time the following weekend arrived, everything I had quietly observed and meticulously documented had begun to coalesce into a plan, so precise that Derek could not anticipate its impact. His arrogance, once a shield, had become a liability, and the social cracks I had noticed weeks earlier were now deep fissures waiting to be revealed. I did not confront him directly. Psychological revenge demands subtlety. Direct confrontation gives the target time to adjust, apologize superficially, or deflect. Instead, I allowed circumstances, evidence, and social dynamics to work in tandem. Every small detail I had recorded, every belittling comment, every casual dismissal of me as a mother, every arrogant assumption was ready to be made visible at the perfect moment. The day of reckoning began at a community charity event where Derek had been invited to speak. Confident as ever, he presented himself as charming, articulate, and dominant, assuming the spotlight belonged to him. He made the usual remarks about single parents, casually implying that someone like me could never provide stability or happiness, as if his audience would not notice the contradictions between his words and reality, but they did. I had ensured that key friends, colleagues, and community members were aware of the context behind his statements, gently guiding them to see what I had endured without directly accusing him. People began observing his patterns, realizing that his confident facade hid manipulation, arrogance, and an underlying sense of entitlement that had caused tension and doubt among those who once trusted him. When he finished speaking, I allowed the moment to linger before speaking. I did not yell, accuse, or make dramatic gestures. Instead, I shared anecdotes of my life as a single parent, the small victories, the challenges, the resilience, and the love I had built for Lily. I recounted my experiences without naming Derek explicitly, but the audience understood perfectly who the cautionary tale referred to. Every word was deliberate, every example a reflection of capability he had underestimated. His friends shifted in their seats, some exchanging glances, others silently questioning the narrative he had carefully constructed around me. Derek's confidence faltered as he realized the subtle exposure had already begun. Simultaneously, Rachel discreetly revealed some documented inconsistencies I had collected, carefully highlighting how Derek's words often contradicted his actions. These details were shared in a way that appeared organic, not orchestrated, another testament to psychological precision. The social environment began turning against him, quietly but undeniably. Marcus provided support from the sidelines, ensuring that my statements were reinforced with credibility. His presence added an unspoken authority, demonstrating that my life was not defined by Derek's opinions but by observable truth. The combination of my narrative, Rachel's subtle reinforcement, and Marcus's credibility created a cascade effect. By the end of the evening, Derek's arrogance had crumbled in a way that could not be repaired by charm, apology, or justification. Friends and colleagues began distancing themselves, subtly at first, then more visibly, as the realization sank in. The man who had dismissed me so confidently was flawed, manipulative, and no longer socially untouchable. Derek's downfall was not explosive, but it was complete. His control over perception had been the only power he truly had, and once that perception shifted, everything else followed naturally. The social isolation he experienced was a consequence of arrogance, exposed to those who had trusted him. In the days following, the impact of my psychological strategy became even clearer. Invitations he had assumed were guaranteed were rescinded. Friends who once took his side approached me privately, acknowledging the discrepancies they had noticed but never spoken about. Social influence had shifted irrevocably, and the environment he had relied on to assert dominance now operated without him. Throughout all of this, Lily remained at the center of my focus. Her life was unaffected by Derek's unraveling because I had ensured stability at home, reinforcing that my actions were not born of vengeance, but of self-respect, protection, and moral correction. The final act of this quiet, devastating karma occurred when Derek attempted to regain credibility at a local social gathering. He spoke with his usual confidence, attempting to re-establish authority and charm. But the audience, already primed by the subtle exposure, no longer listened as they once had. Every word was met with skepticism, every gesture noted for its inconsistency. By the time he realized the full scope of his social isolation, it was irreversible. I never celebrated loudly. I did not gloat or seek public recognition. The power of psychological revenge lies not in spectacle, but in inevitability. Derek had believed he could define reality for everyone around him, including me, but the universe proved otherwise. In that moment, I understood the truth. Revenge is not about malice. It is about restoring balance, visibility, and dignity. By carefully observing, documenting, and exposing truth at the right time, I reclaimed my life, my reputation, and my authority, not just in the eyes of others, but in my own. Derek's arrogance had been his undoing, and the consequences were clear. His social credibility was destroyed, relationships fractured, and his influence evaporated. Karma had spoken, not loudly but undeniably, leaving him isolated while I regained control of the narrative and the respect I had always earned. As I watched him navigate the aftermath, I felt no triumph over him personally, only the quiet satisfaction that injustice, arrogance, and cruelty do not go unchallenged. What Derek said, that no one would love me, that I would fail as a single parent, had been proven false in the most powerful way possible. Through visible resilience, undeniable competence, and the slow but unassailable collapse of his overconfidence. And I knew, without doubt, that Lily had learned the most important lesson of all. Strength, patience, and clarity are far more powerful than intimidation, manipulation, or arrogance. By the end of it all, I was no longer just a single parent underestimated by her ex. I was a force, a presence, and a person whose dignity could not be stolen, whose influence could not be diminished, and whose life was defined by courage, intelligence, and unwavering determination. If someone tells you that you are incapable, unlovable, or inadequate, remember this. The true measure of strength is not how loudly you argue, but how decisively you act when the world underestimates you. Being underestimated is not weakness. It is an invitation to act deliberately, with precision, and with the confidence to restore your own dignity. If someone tried to diminish your life or parenthood, would you confront them immediately, or would you quietly plan a way to prove them wrong in the end?